Thank you, Rovina. Thanks for the introduction. And hello, everyone, and welcome again to this webinar hosted by Palladian. The topic today is mining the past threat discovery models for SOC. I, Arun Harloor, head of global SOC at Palladian, will be your host today. So let me share my screen and okay. Detection and discovery are basically two aspects of threat monitoring. In our today's webinar, we'll look at how real-time threat detection based on predefined signatures can be complemented with threat discovery techniques. Discovery often requires higher skills in security skills and more knowledge of monitored environment. However, using commonly available tools and logical approaches, SOC team can discover many of the undetected threats. The key objectives of today's webinar will be: one, to understand why threat discovery is an important function of SOC; two, usable methods and tools for discovering threats; and three, I will take you through some of the case studies where we have used the discovery tools to demonstrate how discovering threats can complement detection as well. Just to start, let's have a quick look on some key aspects of what detection versus discovery could be. During detection activities, we focus on streams of data, real-time analysis, and mostly correlation is associated to smaller timelines of data. And also mostly known patterns is what we look at during detection. During discovery, we are looking at stored data, exploratory analysis, and then the correlation could be on days, weeks, or months of data, and then mostly unknown patterns. Here is a slide that I would like to take you through. It gives a different perspective on SOC activities. I have defined a SOC activities in the areas of knowns and unknowns to the system and to analysts. For the known knowns, we start by creating the right baselines and also use filtering techniques to reduce the events that hit our SIM solutions. And again, in the same area of known knowns, at the SIM solution, we build the right rules to bring out the alerts that matter, and we triage them and then send them to the incident handler, and based on inputs from the incident handlers, we might add additional filters or build new baselines or build new rules for the post the triage. There are many scenarios wherein the system may not know anything about a specific threat, but the analyst may know it when he sees it. It is in this context that techniques of discovery help us to pick the unknowns to the system and then analyze the threats and maybe later convert them to the knowns to the system as well. If you notice in this slide, the feed for this discovery is the same input that goes to our SIM solution. However, it is not the rules of the SIM, but the human intervention that matters here. We might be wondering here as to why we might not be taking the output of rules as an input to our activity. The fundamental reason for this is the correlation time that the rules use are much smaller than what is done in the discovery activity. And then there could be many threats that neither the analyst or the system might know of. And in such cases, we rely on security intelligence platforms built on machine learning. And the feed for this security intelligence platform, as you notice in the slide, is fundamentally the raw data coming from the devices. In this sense, we could say that in the area of knowns, we use detection techniques, while in the area of unknowns, we use discovery techniques. I would like to highlight here that the cost associated to identifying the threat using detection techniques is much lower than when identified using discovery techniques. Even the impact of the threat to an organization could be far greater if a threat is not detected early. Therefore, it is also important to note that we have to bring all the unknowns into the known territory once they have been discovered. Today in this webinar, we will only cover the aspect of unknown known category. I think the unknown and unknown could be a topic probably for another webinar later. So this is where we would call the detection known knowns, and this could be the unknown known or the unknown unknown areas. I would like to share some of the major advantages we can associate with regards to discovery techniques. Identifying slow attacks. So as we're looking at historical information that is spread over a longer period of time, we are able to pick up low and slow attacks. For example, if an attacker is attempting to break into a system by attempting multiple login attempts, and we have set our SIM to alert whenever we have 5 or more login failures in a minute, and if the attacker is doing only 3 attempts in a minute, we will miss this in our detection process. It is important to note here that in this particular example, though this may not need a lot of skill of an analyst for reporting the problem, but the experience of an analyst to have an awareness of the configuration of the SIM solution, which is in use, is very important. And then identifying communications to recently identified malicious IP and domains. So an IP or domain that is not listed as malicious today could be reported as malicious tomorrow. A SIM solution obtaining these threat intelligence feeds for real-time analysis will probably miss a threat in real time if the attacker IP is not yet listed. So using discovery methods, we'll be able to identify if any communications in the past were associated to malicious IP or domain. Another advantage of this technique will be to create a baseline of an organization's environment that could then be used to identify any new behaviors as well. These baseline inputs could then be fed back into SIM tools for real-time monitoring. Discovering process could be a very good way of understanding if any zero-day attacks had taken place in our environment. And last but not least, discovery process could be a good way of identifying any APTs also. So basically, knowing the baseline and general behavior of a system, we can identify deviations and anomalies that can also help us pick APT activities in the network. So moving forward, I will talk about the methods and tools used within Palladium for discovery process, and I'll also present some case studies. The method we follow in Palladium is as follows. Before taking up the activity of discovery, it is important that we identify the scope of the activity. If we do not decide on the scope of the activity, then we might end up with a lot of noisy events that might divert our focus, and we might again start to miss some of the critical events that we should be picking up. Once the scope is identified, we need to obtain the events associated with the scope, and although many times we might have the right connectors that will get us the normalized data, but sometimes we might need to build the parsers that will help us get the right info in the right format for us to be able to build correlation. All the events that are then picked are then run through a unique rating model. I will talk about this in a moment. And based on the rating model provided, we will look deeply into the key events of interest and analyze them for any malicious or suspicious activity. and then come out with a report on the findings. The rating model used by us involves primarily three key parameters. We have the arc-side priority, and then we have a blacklist priority and a count priority. Arc-side priority is based on 5 categories. That's the agent severity, based on the severity scales used by different devices and normalized. The model confidence, relevance, criticality, and severity that depends on what is in the several active lists that are populated by system rules. ArcSight, based on this formula, assigns a final priority of 0 to 10, where 0 is low importance and 10 is of high importance. Coming to the blacklist priority is determined by the intelligence feeds we obtain and the event being assigned a value based on the IP reputation. And then there is a count priority, which is basically calculated based on aggregated event count. So if an IP address is blacklisted, then the blacklist priority is considered as 2, else it is 0. If the aggregated event count is greater than 10, then we set the count priority to 5, else it is 0. So based on this, you can see a table which we have put in here. Every event is assigned a priority number by summing the ArcSight priority, the blacklist priority, and the count priority with a value of either very high, high, medium, low, and very low. So if our final rating comes between 0 and 2, it's very low. 3 to 4 is low. 5 to 6 we say medium. 7 to 9 is high. 10 to 12 is very high. However, if the priority count is more than 12, we will normalize it to 12. So then these prioritized events are used basically to identify our key events. Just to give you an example of the effect of prioritization. Initially, when we look at a top triggered signatures without applying a prioritization model, we found ARP spoofing detected was the top signature triggered, and then we had the OPT denial of service, and then the HP web inspect probe as another signature. And we applied our prioritization techniques, and we noticed the trigger signatures changed, which became a little bit more relevant to us. And you can see Cisco syslog DOS was the top priority signature. Now, as far as the tools are concerned, apart from the SIM solution, we take the feeds from Bad Harvest for IP reputation, IP to location as a feed for us for geo information, and Tableau for data visualization. I will now present a couple of cases that reflect some of the advantages associated with discovery method that we talked about earlier. By the way, I would like to mention that all the data that you see in the case studies are sanitized, and any resemblance would be just coincidental. Okay, so I'll be talking about slow and low attacks, identifying communications to malicious IP, and a zero-day attack analysis that we have seen as cases. So what you see now in the slide is top 10 firewall log denied traffic for a period of 1 day. you will notice that a high number of denied events were observed from a host. After analyzing logs, we observed that although this IP had the highest number of denied events, but denied events didn't match the alert threshold that we had set. That is, we had set about 1,000 denied events in 1 minute from the same IP, and hence was not alerted by the SIM use case. Then we actually analyzed a little bit further on a particular IP, which is 10.160.4.51, and the denied events trend for the day from this IP showed a high number of denied events, and it shows that there is denied traffic pretty much every minute, but the events count were not enough to trigger our alert threshold. So we did a further triage of this traffic, and what we found was that they were all destined to a Google DNS 4.4.4.4, and that was against the baseline of the organization as well, and it could have been for various reasons, so I'll not talk about that, but at least it could highlight that there was something like this happening in the network. So I'll take you to another case study, which is to do with a zero-day attack analysis. So in the table below, we had noticed 3 attacker IPs, for which we had done a shell shock vulnerability analysis for the day of attack, that is 30th September, along with the data from 23rd September to 29th September. The first thing that we noticed were that these attackers were never detected as blacklisted IPs in the SIM initially, although we had the threat intelligence feeds of malicious IP to correlate. But when we were doing the analysis, all the 3 IPs were reported as blacklisted IP. So this is what I was saying earlier, where there's every possibility that specific IP might not have been blacklisted earlier, but now, it might get picked up in our discovery techniques. Based on our analysis on the IDS and firewall logs for the 7 days before the day of data attack, we found only attacker 46, 161, 41, 142 with accept traffic on the destinations of server A, B, C, and D. Then again, there was no suspicious activity noticed on IPs and WAF till the 28th of September. In the lower image, you can notice that we had found 1 port scan alert from the same source, which was seen on 25th September, and this was in IPS logs for us. In this slide, we have shown a more detailed analysis of the activities done by the attacker IPs as seen by the IPS device. We can assume here that signature blocking was not enabled till 1717 on 30th September, as the first blocked attempt was observed at 1718 over here. So analyzing the attacks which were not blocked by IPS, we see that the attacker IP, which is 46, 161, 41, 142, tried to exploit bash remote code execution vulnerability by sending crafted messages with modified user agent and request URL fields. The command executed was just a ping command, and if this were to be successful, it is that only a ping was done. Whereas an attacker with the IP 142.4.251.115 trying to send modified request URLs to targets, but then there's no command that was observed for exploiting shell vulnerability. This attacker just tried to traverse default CGI bin directory, and this attempt can be considered probably as an initial footprinting stage to gather information to launch an attack later. However, if you look further down, in the case of the attacker IP 130.185.109.198, the attacker tried to exploit shell shock vulnerability on target server B by trying to create a directory named temp and trying to download a file named zen.txt from the URL, which is in there, and later rename zen.txt to zen.php as well. This attacker also tried to echo command to display some data, and the string looks like an encrypted string, so we were not able to predict the outcome of this command. We did further analysis by correlating data from IPS and web server, and we also noticed that the same IP 130.185.109.188 also tried to access the files zen.txt and zen.php. So this way we could identify that the attacker 130.185.109.198 appeared to be more suspicious than the others, and it was server B that was attacked by this IP and was probably compromised. On similar lines, we also had some interesting case study where we noticed that although, for example, URL content filtering was enabled, when we did a daily analysis, we could discover that there were many communications to unwanted sites. So that's another case study which we did.